And we're talking about your BHAP and why it's so important to have a big, hairy, audacious problem that you're meant to solve. And now we're going to talk about, well, how do you do something about it, right? So this is a framework that we all go through. This love people, go places, change lives. And this is something all IJs are going through, right? Every one of us. And you know where it's at. But here's the secret. It starts with you. It starts with you. Before we jump to solving the problems, or worse yet, being part of the problem, it needs to start with you. When those difficult days come, when those tough days come, when you want to quit, want to give up, it needs to be rooted in something deeper. It's got to start with you. So we spend a lot of time at the beginning of your journey. We're going to be spending a lot of time focusing on you and the specific problem that you're meant to solve. And this is us. Once you figure out what that is, it's this wild, crazy journey, hanging off cliffs and doing amazing things and going places you never thought you'd go before. Being in rooms you never thought you'd be in before, going places you never thought you'd be before. You look back at yourself and say, look how much I've grown, how much I've changed. I cannot believe it, right? It's a wild and crazy journey. And this is where we start. What are you meant to solve? That's the question we've got to answer before we go anywhere else, is what are you meant to solve? What are you meant to solve? Oh, I love these comments. I love them. I love those X's. Woohoo! We got some Honduras X's coming in. I love it. So what are you meant to solve? That's the very first question that we ask. And that's where we spend a lot of time digging in, right? And so often, especially around entrepreneurship, it's so easy to just want to jump into this business or this thing, but it's got to be rooted in something deeper. It needs to be rooted in your personal story, your passion, purpose, and calling. And when those difficult days come and it's going to be easy to quit, easy to give up, you say, nope, this is what I'm meant to solve. And I'm going to find another way. The business, the restaurant, the delivery company, the tech company, all right, the retail, all that that's not what I'm meant to do. That's a means that allows me to do what I'm meant to do, right? That allows me to work on what I'm meant to solve, right? What I'm meant to solve. And so that's why it's so important we spend a lot of time digging into that question. So here's what we say with IJ. There's a lot of problems in search of a solution. A lot of problems. And the world has really, really big problems. And you don't have to look very far, right? 800 million people don't have access to clean water, right? Billions don't have access to clean sanitation, right? Billions on our same planet. Millions of children live without shelter on this same planet we live on. And billions don't have access to basic financial services or bank accounts. Billions live without electricity on the same planet, right? They live without electricity on the same planet we live on. And in the United States alone, over 120 people die from suicide every day. 120 every day. And 22 to 27 of those every day are active or retired military veterans. And that doesn't count the families as well. So we could go on and talk about these big, hairy problems, and you don't have to look very far, whether in your own community, your backyard, or on the other side of the world. There are a lot of needs. But the question is, what are you going to do with what you've been given? How will you respond? We say there's three options, right? One is you can just spiral into deep depression, which is one way I guess that could happen. That's not the preferred method, but we've had to help a lot of people because there are really ugly things in this world and difficult things that people have to work through. So that is one option, but we prefer not to go that route. Second, you can just block it out, go on with your comfortable life and be upset. We say in the United States, be upset when pumpkin spice comes out in August instead of October, right? Or three, you can do something about it. You can step up, and in fact, you can be the solution. And in fact, we realize sometimes the problem is not necessarily the problem. The problem is us realizing we can step up to be the solution. Do more with what you've been given. Start something that changes lives. And so you say, okay, great. I'm frustrated by these big needs I see in the world, whether it's a healthcare, education, right? Poverty, human trafficking, suicide, all kinds of needs. We can go on and on and on and on. And I'm sure they're flashing through your head. And in your own story, you should already start thinking of, these are things that I feel like I'm called to solve, right? So where to begin? Where to begin? And so often what we will do is take a quick action because our heart is in the right place. And I've been through this journey, and we all struggle with this. When you see a need, it's so easy to want to just fix it immediately, right? And especially if we're going after a big, hairy, audacious problem, we could actually be contributing to the problem or making it worse, right, by our actions. And instead of bringing sustainable solutions, we bring a temporary Band-Aid, put a Band-Aid on the need. And so before we jump into solving the problem, we have to better understand the problem. And so that's where, as Impact Junkies, we spend a lot of time, right, digging into these problems to understand the needs before we jump to solutions. And there's a great book, Toxic Charity, that we all start with, right? This is a key starting point for IJs. One of the foundational readings is Toxic Charity. And it's a great reading. Robert Lupton is a pastor in Atlanta. He talks about in cities in like Atlanta and also on the other side of the world. He talks about how charities could actually be harming, and churches could be actually harming those that we say we love if we're not careful. And it talks a lot about empowering those we love rather than disempowering them. If we do for those in need what they have the capacity to do for themselves, we're actually disempowering them. And if we say we love people and we want to help them, we need to understand how to better help them, right? And this is where empathy comes in a lot. We're going to spend a lot of time digging into empathy, right? You may have heard this phrase, give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, show them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. We say, that's great. Okay, that's great. And we do a lot of education, but let's not stop there. That's a great next step, but let's not stop there. Let's not just give a fish, teach a fish, but let's empower and invest in them and help them buy the lake. Sell fishing licenses to the community. Start a fishing hatchery. Start a chain of fishing restaurants. Start a professional fisher network in their country and spread it around their region, right? Awesome. So a lot of times when we talk about business and ventures, it's on one side of the fence, and impact can be on the other side of the fence. Especially in the church space, in ministry, it's easy to we can compartmentalize our life. Say like, well, this is that side of my ministry, and then this over here is business. And one of the things we are working constantly to do is to break down that wall. Say it's not just, well, you stay over on that side of the fence and just make money. You're a money-making machine, and then you just throw money over the fence, and then we do the impact. That's led to a lot of failed policy in aid giving, and we'll dig into all this more, but it's led to a lot of failed aid. It's a lot of charities that have the right heart, but the poor execution that can actually contribute to the problems, right? And long term, there's a lot we'll dig in there. But the idea is to break down this wall, and let's do impact ventures. And as entrepreneurs and investors and business leaders, organizational leaders, it's even more important that we turn on our brain, right? We turn on our brain as entrepreneurs and investors, and we're actually attacking these problems, going after these problems. And as entrepreneurs, these are the more like higher level, it's like next level entrepreneurship, right? It's one thing to say, okay, I figured out how to make money. I can sell this widget and I make a profit. Cool. That's something, right? But what if you could do something whereby selling a product, you're also educating a community, or bringing clean water to a village, or connecting recovering and former military veterans with a new mission and a new purpose in life, right? And connecting them with entrepreneurs on the other side of the world, and by in turn also helping them with the expertise that they have gained, on and on and on. So we call this like a triple black belt entrepreneur. It's how can you solve multiple market problems, right? By approaching these like entrepreneurs and problem solvers. We go in to better understand the needs and try to find ways to add more, right? To level up, right? And those are the most exciting problems as entrepreneurs and business leaders that you want to be working on. And that's what we say. There's these new terms, social entrepreneurship or impact investing. And we are fine to take that on. That's okay. But we think entrepreneurship in and of itself should just go back to why the origins of entrepreneurship and the free market and free people. The idea was around empathy. And we'll talk a lot about that and dig into what we mean by that. But empathy is about putting yourself in the place of those who are facing these needs, right? And it's the classic do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or love God and love people, right? Love people. If you truly love them, you want to help them, right? And not hurt them. So entrepreneurship as its core is understanding these needs and bringing solutions to these needs. So we spend a ton of time on your BHAP and your specific BHAP, right? And so I'm going to leave you with this visual. This is something I said we talk about your place on the planet, and this was the first, one of the first. It was the first time for humans orbiting the moon in Apollo 8. The first time, a lot of firsts. This is an amazing mission in the 1960s. This was Apollo 8, the first time humans had left the orbit of Earth and just shot out into the black nothingness of space towards the moon. And they happened to get, they made it. They got caught, they got in the moon's light gravity and were orbiting around, and then they lost signal, right? They lost communication with Earth, no radio contact. And then they come up around the backside of the moon, and this was the first time humans had seen the Earth rise from the surface, the horizon of the moon. Their mission was to really, they were testing, of course, to get to moon and back to Earth, but they were also looking for landing sites. So they were really focused on the moon. But as they looked up, coming around the backside of the moon, the Earth just rose. At this, everything they've ever known, every person who's ever lived on that little blue marble floating out there, that planet. And he says, quick, grab the film. And he said, the black film or the color film? And he says, give me the color film. And he snaps this photo out the little window on the side of the capsule. And on their way back, you can watch the documentary. And on the way back, they're talking about, if I was coming to Earth, to this planet, would I think to land on the blue part or the brown part? And I don't see any borders. And on they start talking and trying to grapple with their feelings that they're having as a human, and trying to put things into perspective, right? And speaking of perspective, this is the farthest photo we have. This is one of the Voyager missions. Took this, was launched in the 70s. And did this amazing tour by all these planets. It was some of the first images we had of Saturn and Jupiter and these beautiful images. And it was traveling at 11 miles a second. 11 miles a second. And just broke out of our solar system in the last few years. And before it broke out, they turned the camera around and took one last snapshot of our planet. And this is called the pale blue dot. And everybody who's ever lived, every person, every experience that you've ever had is on that little pale blue dot, that little speck right there, if you can see it. That's Earth. And it puts a lot of things into perspective when you're talking about your big, hairy, audacious problem. And you think, is this something I really can do? Or you think, well, maybe somebody else ought to do it. Maybe it's too big for me. Maybe this is something someone else should do. Or I'm not qualified. Or, oh, I'm just going to go on with my normal life. I'm comfortable. And then I hope this inspires you, because it can be overwhelming to think, wow, there's 7 billion people on that little pale blue dot. And you think, how can I make a difference? Or you can look at that and be inspired and say, look how tiny that dot is in perspective. And I can actually make a dent in that little pale blue dot. And in fact, you see the 7 billion people just waiting for you to step up. 7 billion people just waiting for you to step up. So the question is, what are you going to do with what you've been given? We're starting this journey together, working on your story. It's starting with you. Before we go to understand what you're meant to solve or what you're going to solve and how you're going to solve it, we need to understand you. Dig into your life story, dig into your chapters, start to pull out the themes, right? Start to understand the dots that connect. So often we're so busy and looking around at the world and there's so much noise. If we could just take time to look down, to stop and reflect on what we've gone through, where we've been, you realize your heart has been guiding you all along. And it becomes so clear to you what you're meant to solve. Right now, there is something that you're meant to solve and there are people out there waiting for you to step up. And the question is, what are you going to do with what you've been given?
Talents and abilities.
How we go forward.
This is your moment. This is where it happens. This is where your story changes. This is where you decide to take action. This is where you become the solution. This is where you see lives changed. This is where you are changed. This is where adventurous entrepreneurs go. Love people, go places, change lives. Let's get after it. The question you've got to ask yourself is, what am I meant to solve? What big, hairy, audacious problem are you meant to solve? In your city, in your community, in your country, in your world, what are you meant to solve? And once you answer that question, nothing can stop you. It's time to stop floating down the river of life, just taking whatever comes your way. It's time to live out the dream that's been placed inside of you all along. Start that thing, make that change, take that action, just go. There's just too much at stake and too many lives waiting for you to stay comfortable.